immigration reform. Currently, she's a proud East Boston resident and hopes to work in her community to advocate for climate and social change. She also prioritizes centering community voice, that's the rangeritis thing again, for outdoor and recreation space through her role as program manager for the Trust for Public Lands Boston Parks for People program. And so that is my introduction. And Lupe, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. It's nice having my bio read out loud. I didn't notice how many things I had in my bio that were so mouthful, including my degree program. Well, thanks for having me, and I'm really excited to present to you all today. I'm gonna present. Can everyone see my screen? Good, and everything great. So I will introduce myself again a little bit. My name is Lupe, and I'm going to be talking a bit more about the Parks for People program in Boston, what we do, some of the priorities that we have, and my personal experiences within it. So I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction about TPL and the Trust for Public Land, what we do at a national and a state level, and then I'll go into talking more about our local projects and what my work specifically is. So TPL was funded in 1972, which is quite some time ago now, and our mission is to create parks and protect land for people, ensuring healthy, livable communities for generations to come. And so we have about 25 offices across the U.S. And lots of staff. We kind of do a lot of park and land conservation work, and we sort of have been able to protect over 3.8 million acres of conserved land. And so that is a bit separate from our park development work. Recently, I think the Parks for People program across TPL was created about 10 years ago, maybe a little later than that. We have done park work in the past. Actually, we're in Boston, we're most notably known for our involvement in some of the Greenway networks, including the East Boston Greenway, which is the one I'm most familiar with because it's in my neighborhood. And we've also been able, as a national organization, to secure about $80 billion in voter-approved funding. And so that means, working to create legislature at a national and state level that helps secure funding for park and open space. At a Massachusetts level, we have been able to secure a little over 14,000 acres in protected land. And we've also have a really great Community Preservation Act program that runs through our Boston office that has helped 184 cities and towns adopt and administer CPA at a local level. And our team that does this is really great. And a lot of our projects are CPA funded at a capital level. So without this work and without the commitment of cities and towns to having CPA funding, it wouldn't be possible. Some of the other stuff that we've worked on in Boston has been, really partnering with the city to ensure that everyone has a park within 10-minute walk. We actually completed 100% park access went with one of our most recently finished projects. Well, the park isn't built yet because of COVID. A lot of things got delayed, but it's actually Chittick Schoolyard, and it is in Mattapan, and Mattapan, Rosendale. Yeah. It is a schoolyard. This is before my time, so I'm sorry if I don't know a lot about this park, but I have visited a few times. So it is a schoolyard that will be accessible to the school as a park during the daytime, and then after school hours, it will be open to the public. And it was the last park needed to complete 100% 10-minute walk access for the city of Boston. I will say, though, even if everyone has a park within 10-minute walk, it doesn't mean that all the parks are of the same quality or have the same resources. And so that's sort of what our shift and focus has really been, making sure that everyone has access to a quality park, and also thinking about why not a 5-minute walk as well. So those are all been conversations that we've been having internally as a Boston Parks team. Another thing that we've worked on within the Boston region is the Boston Metro Mayor's Decision Support Tool. So this is a GIS support tool that allows folks to go on and pull data across a variety of different topics, from climate equity, infrastructure, transportation, demographics, income. And it kind of gives you a sense of what the communities are like. And it allows our team and other staff across the city of Boston to, and sort of like the general Boston metro mayor's area to make better informed decisions. I think, data and information is really important part of our mission and our toolkit. And if we are able to better collect data and have a better sense of what the actual conditions are, we're able to make smarter choices and know where to go and be informed and inform communities as we sort of work through our projects. And so the Boston Metro Mayor's Decision Support Tool is a really big part of that. And we've worked on it with other organizations. It's not just a TPL endeavor. It's been, across the city. There's a lot of organizations that have been involved in making this happen. One of them most notably is the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. So I want to talk a little bit of our national strategic plan and how it guides our local work. And so, our initiatives really are, land access, parks, trails, and land and trails are sort of what we do at a big national level. But as we start to work more and more in cities, we have centered park and parks space and access more in our work. And with that as well, schoolyards, right? As we think about how do we make sure that our kids have access to green schoolyards that are helping mitigate a lot of climate impact, but also not super hot concrete slabs. I grew up in Miami and we had a ton of hot concrete slabs in schoolyards, and it was fine, but from what I've seen from the schoolyards that we've developed now, they're just so much more engaging, and they have better shade and cooling and just a lot of different educational components to it too. One of the programs that has been the most successful in making these schoolyards is actually our New York City program, and sort of they've kind of streamlined the process, which is pretty surprising because New York City is so big and there's so much to do, but they've done a really, really great job and we're really proud of them. And Chittick was our first and so far only schoolyard program. It's kind of a bit more complicated because of BPS and sort of how they function within the city of Boston, but we're always open to thinking about other ways that we can incorporate green and outdoor space to children and young people. So a lot of why we do it, and I guess this kind of gets, what is it, the ranger ride? Is that what was it? Is that we center communities in all of our work. Our mission and the way that we take on projects and how we do projects within Boston is community led. We often have projects because community members come to us or someone mentions, oh, maybe you could be a good help, and we take on meetings and we sort of chat about what they want and how we can help support them. So all of our projects come from the community, and we don't really go forward with them if there isn't community support. And that really means that we're, centering the voices that need to be heard. And also we already have community buy-in going forward on these projects. And we know that when the parks are built, that there will be ownership over the space as well, which is extremely important part of involving the community and making sure that you're preserving and ensuring that the parks that you're making are for the communities you intend to serve. And so how we do it, I kind of spoke about this a bit throughout this presentation already, so protecting land for public good. So all of our projects are public park projects and they have to be publicly accessible. Park transformation and creation. So it's not just about creating new parks, but like updating park space or outdoor space that might not be accessible or in great shape. Data insight, right? So we need a lot of data and a lot of research in order to make the best choices and to continue to be informed. That's a really big part of our work, and we have a great research team at TPL that helps us do this. Actually, a report was put out last year about the effects of the heat island effects on cities and sort of how parks help mitigate that. It was a really great report, and it has something that we use and we look back at constantly to reference going forward. And advocacy. So we advocate not just at a local level for park creation, but at a national level, we have a government affairs team that does really great critical work. And then one of the biggest parts of how funding comes into play at all this is that we really work on getting, private funding, because we have a great philanthropy team, and helping turn that into public funds, right? Because all of our projects are publicly funded pretty much. CPA funds almost all of our park creation projects, but without having private funding to pay for my staff time or, help support communities or, create this programming or this event, we wouldn't really be able to get any of our big capital funding for any of our projects. So before I go into talking a bit more about environmental justice and sort of the work that we do, I wanted to talk a little bit about what environmental justice is and what is this sort of buzzword or term that we use, and that we also then go on to say environmental justice communities. So I pulled a definition off the EPA's website. And so when we say environmental justice community, it is a community that has not received fair treatment or had meaningful involvement because of their race, color, national origin, or income. And so I wanted to point this out because I think that I have used this term a lot, right? I say environmental justice community, and I expect folks to know what I mean. But at the same time, it is a term that was created because the climate change community or the climate change advocacy community has often been so privileged and white. And this term is used out of necessity to kind of explain or kind of set a precedent that no, we're doing environmental justice work. And it's not specifically just about it's not just general climate change work. We're doing work specifically with environmental justice communities that have been the victims of a lot of the systemic environmental racism. And because of that, we're able to, it's really difficult to talk exactly about what we mean when we say environmental justice and why we use it. Because I think, honestly, it's just another buzzword that people throw around. But I do think that it has an importance because it sort of centers and prioritizes this work without having to go too much into detail. When I say we're working with environmental justice communities, people know what I mean, and we're able to move on and then do that work. But I did want to point it out and, kind of elicit some thought about it, because I want to make sure that we're mindful of what the words we're using and where they come from and what they mean. So when we are working with environmental justice communities, I guess some of the stuff that has been really important to our work and some of the foundation that us as a Boston team, what we think about and what we make sure that we're doing when we're going into every project are some of the things that I listed here, and I'm going to go through them. So we try to prioritize, or we do prioritize community leadership. Like I said, a lot of our projects don't happen because if there isn't community buy-in or community leadership already. And so that is something that is really important to us. Whenever we're doing a project and we're working on something, we're making sure that community leaders are at the forefront, that we're running everything by them, and that the work that we're doing centers their needs or their expectations. So I see myself as working for community leaders and not vice versa. And so at the same time, we also help support community buy-in and ownership of the land. Like I mentioned earlier, community buy-in and ownership really makes parks what they are, helps make these parks meet the needs of communities. And if there isn't any community buy-in or support over a park project, then you're not going to see the same levels of engagement, the same participation in programming or participation in design. So it's really, really important that from the beginning we have that community buy-in. And so we also help educate and empower community members to advocate for themselves and each other. We try to provide resources. We try to help give community members toolkits that they might need to be better advocates and feel more confident at advocating for themselves. We help connect the resource directly with them. So even after we're done with a park project and we might have moved on to something else, we know that the community members we've worked with have access to some of the resources that we've already laid out. And we know that they have a better understanding on how to advocate for themselves. A lot of it comes around real estate dealings and sort of land transactions. That's a lot of what my boss Kelly does, but we make sure to work with the community so that they know what these deals are, what are some of the options, what are some of the legal proceedings that might be possible. And that really helps empower community members to be able to think about other parcels or other lots within their community that might be viable. And then at the same time, we try to spotlight, community initiatives at a local and national level. So we work with our marketing team to put out articles or get, articles in the Globe or, other newspapers that do spotlight community initiatives and spotlight how we work to support them. And we And like I said, we bring the funding, resources, and connections to our park projects, and we try to create long-lasting connections to these resources even after we're gone. So I'm going to talk a bit more about our Boston projects now. And so we have a few projects, kind of our active projects now. So Chittick Schoolyard is technically not active. We've passed on all of the design information to the city, and that's pending on being built. It has sort of gone a bit slower because that's sort of how things work now. But our main 3 active projects are Grove Hall Park, Norwell Street Park, and Edgewater Trail. And I'm going to talk specifically about Norwell Street Park and Edgewater, because I think they're great examples to try to communicate some of the things that I've already talked about today. But they're all along the Fairmont Greenway corridor. Grove Hall is like a little outside of it, but it's still kind of close enough. And so the Fairmont Greenway corridor is a proposed green space corridor that kind of runs alongside the Fairmont line. And I'm sure you'll hear more about this, or you already know, because I know that our next presenter also has a park project along the Fairmont corridor. So I'm going to talk most about Edgewater. So the Edgewater and Neponset Riverfront is a community. Actually, the Edgewater Neighborhood Association is the community organization that we work with. And so they're a community that's really close to Mattapan Square. They're actually, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but Mattapan Square is right up here at this corner. And this is the whole waterfront. It is a environmental justice community. There are over 4,000 people who live within a 10-minute walk, and it's primarily Black neighborhood. And it has been a neighborhood that has been really impacted by COVID-19. And so our work with the Edgewater Neighborhood Association has been about access to this waterfront. On the other side is Milton, which is a more affluent community, and there is access to the waterfront on that side, but not on the Mattapan side. This is a picture actually I took last fall, standing in the middle of the river. It's a really beautiful waterfront, and it's a great space. One of the things that has been the most difficult about it is that, sorry, let me go back a little bit. Oh no, I hate when this thing gets lost. I tried to click off, but it wouldn't. One of the things that has been the most difficult for the community is that there hasn't been any engagement from DCR about access to the space. And there's this pretty big wall. It's wall that I'm actually showing right now that doesn't allow the community to get back there. There's actually only one cutting in the wall. And because there's only one cutting in the wall, it actually runs for 8 blocks. If you go in and something happens down, or if you get hurt, or you get lost, there's only one way in it or out. It actually makes it really dangerous. It makes a lot of community members feel unsafe about going back there. And then because the wall is so tall, it actually allows for a lot of illegal dumping to happen behind the wall without it being seen or documented. We actually used our leverage and our connections with DCR to present at the DCR Governor's Commission meeting, and we were able to highlight this specific project, and we had a community member come in and talk about their needs. And because of this and a lot of community advocacy, DCR actually agreed to take action and help bring access to the waterfront for the community. Another park I'll just briefly kind of mention is Norwell Street Park. This is also along the Fairmont Greenway. It is one of the parks where we worked with the community to help negotiate some of the privately owned parcels that were on the land to be given to the city for park development. And this, is something that we helped facilitate, but it really came out of community want and need. And there's a really great community organization called the West of Washington Coalition that has, really pushed and advocated for this park. And the city actually just assigned a park project manager. The Wild Park Commission was able to have a seat on picking, the landscape architects that are going to be designing the park. And we're waiting for the design process to begin in construction next year, which is really great and exciting. And so, like I mentioned before, we have a toolkit for success that's really, dependent on, helping communities of color and, environmental justice community create the changes in their neighborhoods they want to see, and to have the park access that they would like. And so we actually have seen a lot of developments come from our work. And, the Edgewater neighborhood has been advocating for riverfront access for 20 years. And now they have a really great community garden due to their advocacy, and they're actually starting to develop their own food forest. They're working with Boston Food Forest Coalition, Urban Food Forest Coalition, to create a food forest in their community. And, Norwell Street, the WOW Park, the WOW Coalition is thinking about how other empty parcels in their neighborhood could be developed. And, they have a park, they're getting the park that they want, but they're also looking at, well, is this other empty parcel going to be public housing, or is it going to be affordable housing? Or, they want to have a say in how other empty parcels in their community get developed, because they know and they understand the importance of having a seat at that table, or being able to have those communications and that contact with the city. So we've seen a lot of great things come out of these park projects, and also seen how community advocacy and involvement has really created long-term engagement from communities in their park processes and other neighborhood processes. And so I wanted to mention that, this isn't just doing a park or, bringing outdoor space. It's really about creating intersectional change. And we do this by investing in communities when we're doing these projects, right? We're getting funding together, but the funding we often use to pay community members. We actually have, for our Grove Hall project, we have a community park committee, and we're paying all of the community members on the committee for their time as experts of their neighborhood, right? So they're consulting us in this process. And it's a great way to put money back into the community. We work with local artists as much as we can. We try to support artwork and art development across these neighborhoods whenever we have a space or an event and stuff. And then we also try as hard as we can to use local vendors and work with local businesses. At the same time, it's really about creating increased land access, bringing climate education. Whenever we do pop-ups and we go to events, we try to bring climate educational activities, and, also being mindful of how this all connects with food access. We have had park projects that used to have community garden aspects, or, at Edgewater, we see how they have sort of moved on now to think about how they would like to see a food forest in their neighborhood. And we try to collaborate with other local organizations in Boston that do this work as well. We used to do urban ag work. About 6 years ago, we started doing urban agricultural work, and we kind of wrapped that up over the last year, which was a really big part of our local Boston project. Yeah, and that's it. That's my whole presentation. It was really nice being able to speak to you all today. And I hope that this was helpful and educational. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me see. Stop.
Extremely helpful. And I don't know if anybody wants to jump in with questions now, but this would be a good time.
I just have a couple terminology questions. So I'm not super familiar with what the Community Preservation Act is.
Yeah,
that works. And also the term food forest is one that is new to me. So both of those would be helpful if you could explain.
Yeah, so Community Preservation Act funding is basically, there is this state law that was passed that allows municipalities to adopt Community Preservation Act. And so what that means is that they'll use, I think it's deed taxes or any kind of legal documentation when you go to the RMV and you have to pay an extra tax or for documentation fees. All of those taxes actually get put into a fund that are allowed to be used for three main categories. So the categories are open space, park and open space, housing, and historical conservation. I think that's what it is. So that means that all of that money goes to those funds, and then the state matches it. So there's a local Community Preservation Act fund that gets matched by a state fund, and it's usually 50-50. I don't know exactly. There's specific rules about how that works, but a lot. And so you have to use all of that money. There is actually a quota of the amount of funds you have to use for each thing. So I think I'm pretty sure the housing is about 25%. So at least 25% of your funding has to go towards housing, and it's not just any housing. I think it has to be specifically affordable housing and stuff. And so a lot of municipalities tap into this fund to be able to create, a lot park projects or affordable housing and stuff. And it has to be adopted by the municipality. So the city of Boston adopted theirs in like 2015, even though the program has been around since 2001, I think. And so the municipality adopts it. They actually have a council that gets to approve every project and so on. But it's a really, really great funding source, and no other state has it. And it provides, like I said, it funds all of our park projects. It actually capital funds all of our park projects. So, yeah, I think Norwell Street has $2 million in funding for their park project. That's all CPA, which is pretty great.
Food Forest. We're doing this,
Yes.
Actually a review of a proposal from the Boston Food Forest Coalition for Riley Foundation as we speak. But
cool. Well, Food Forest is a kind of park-like space that has edible food. So trees or bushes or plants that are edible. And so a lot of times it's like kind of like a community garden, but it's a food forest instead. And there's lots of different variations to them. I'm not an expert on food forests at all. That's kind of what my understanding is.
I think go ahead, Kate. And
yeah,
I'm going to jump in because I'm running slow here.
Oh, okay. I have a couple, hopefully they're quick. One, you mentioned a report. I think you were talking about the heat in cities that you guys refer to, and I didn't catch what it was. I was curious about what report that is.
Yeah, it's called, I forget the specific title, but it is a report on, I can share it in the chat while the next presenter goes on.
That'd be awesome.
I think that'll be just way easier to do.
It's just always nice to have some of the backup too to refer to. And then another question I had about when you're thinking about these projects, and I love you're getting you have buy-in from communities and integrating local staffing and all that. When you're coming up with the budget for the whole project, is like how far out are you thinking? Does the budget include that sort of ongoing maintenance and the fact that you're going to need staffing to be, keeping the park up? Like how comprehensive are the budgets that you're raising?
So we budget out to ribbon cutting, basically. We assume like from the beginning of a park, maybe like 5 years, but like usually like 3 to 5 years-ish. A lot of our parks are City of Boston, so all of the projects we have right now will be taken on by the Parks Department, except for Chittick, because that will be BPS, Boston Schools. But because of that, they do all the maintenance. And we don't hold any construction contracts or none of that. The city does all of that. Our role is usually creating starting working with the communities to get the city on board or have city buy-in to do park development. And then once the city has taken on a project and assigned a program manager, we make sure that the community's involved step by step. And, oftentimes the city process for community engagement is 3 meetings, usually at night, not that great. So we try to supplement that system by having other kinds of community engagement opportunities for community members.
And so then it's sort of ribbon cutting, you're handing it over and you're saying Boston, the city in question, you're managing, you're in charge of park management. Exactly. Do you engage with them and sort of what park management means or what does that look like? Or is it kind of saying okay, now you have your experts, you gotta, it's a whole separate entity.
It's super complicated because Boston has a lot of parks that have not been well managed, right? And so that's a part of the problem. But our relationship with the city is we don't really get to have that kind of conversation. And also we understand that the parks team is very small for the scale of the city. And it actually is really small. There's like 3 or 4 planners for the whole city of Boston. It's very little. So they don't have as many resources as they need or they would be able to, they would like to have. So whenever we can, we try to spread that kind of information and say, our parks team is not great. And, Boston Parks needs more resources. And we try to advocate for that and let people know. But we don't really get to have that conversation. I think it would be super interesting and great. And I would, as we sort of start getting involved with more park. So we actually have a project coming in that's not with the Parks Department, but with Boston Housing Authority. And it's about a park that was kind of abandoned, and it will be sort of about recreating, updating that park, making it more accessible and more usable for the community. So I think as we go down that and start working more on that, we'll sort of see that conversation start to happen more. Like, what does maintenance really mean? Hopefully, though, parks are better designed this time to be a bit more self-sustainable with just basic maintenance necessities like trash removal, grass cutting, snow removal, such on. Right.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent questions. We're going to move on. And it's a pleasure to introduce David Queeley. Some of you may know David from your grant-making life. He is currently the director of EcoInnovation for the Codman Square Neighborhood Development Corporation. That title, by the way, you would not have seen 10, 20, 30 years ago. So that shows how responsive CDCs have been toward this movement, and particularly, I think, Codman Square. When I think of David, I think of the word eminence. He's just done a lot of stuff. And so I can recite some of this. He was the New England Regional Director for the Trust for Public Lands, Parks for Peoples program. So there's some symmetry here. He's been a consultant to the Funders Network for Smart Growth and Livable Communities. They're going to be speaking at our next session. He's a vice president and senior planner at New Ecology. He's a vice president for community and government affairs at the Prospect Park Alliance. He's the first director of the Mass Audubon Society's Boston Nature Center and senior planner for the Metropolitan District Commission, now DCR in Massachusetts. He served on Rose Kennedy Greenway Leadership Council, on the Trustees of Reservations Advisory Council, and on the Mayor's Climate Change Action Committee. And he currently serves as an associate park commissioner for the city of Boston, and so forth. I'm going to stop it, David. It's too much, but take it away.
That's exhausting just hearing all that stuff, actually. But
Yeah.
I didn't realize I'd done so much either. So thanks. Let me pull up my presentation, and I'll try to get through it efficiently. And thank you, Phil, for inviting me to speak. And Guadalupe, it's great to see someone so great in the Parks for People position, carrying on the great traditions that we've had in the past. So it's great to meet you. I heard you were coming, but this is the first time I've actually met you, I think.
Thank you.
So let me share my screen and go from there. Okay. So this is just a quote from Jane Jacobs, who's one of my favorite urbanistas, I'll call her. Cobinsburg NDC is about to have its 40th anniversary. We've been around for that long, working in the Codman Square neighborhood, which is essentially in South Dorchester. We do spill over into Mattapan a little bit. We've been doing a lot of work around really displacement, but also what's kind of started to bubble up in the last 8 years since I've been there is climate. So we're now also working at the intersection of climate, health, and equity, and kind of the typical issues that Codman Square experiences. So we did a survey about 8 years ago called Keeping Codman Square Affordable. We did it over a number of years. These are just some of the statistics that kind of came up. And keep in mind that COVID has now exacerbated every single one of these statistics. We did a survey around the first couple of months of COVID, then we did one in about 2 months later. And the first time around, many people were saying, I'm okay, I still have a job, I'm still working. And then the next time around, probably half of those people that we surveyed the first time either had lost a job, or their partner was out of work, or they were having trouble finding, food resources. And so COVID's really just done a number on these communities that were already behind the eight ball. We also partnered with the Conservation Law Foundation on a 10-year longitudinal study looking at health and looking at the built environment and impact on residents' health, so looking specifically at housing and transit and those sorts of things. And that's being led by Vedette Gavin at the Conservation Law Foundation. So a lot of our work, when I say our, I mean Cobinsburg NDCs, Southwest Boston CDC over in Hyde Park, and Dorchester Bay EDC. We work together on something called the Fairmont Indigo CDC Collaborative. So a lot of our work is focused along the Fairmont line, which, as you may know, is a transit equity issue. If you took a bus from the Codman Square area to downtown, it takes you about an hour and a half. And if you take the commuter rail, it's 12 minutes to get downtown. And about 40% of the people that live along the Fairmont line work downtown. So it's kind of a no-brainer that we needed this new commuter rail line, the Fairmont line, to be put in place. There's still some equity issues going on in terms of frequency of service. That started to be addressed, but also looking at things like, can we get the diesel trains off of this line because you're running through neighborhoods of color that already have issues with air quality and asthma. So there's still some work to be done, but we've made some good progress in terms of the built environment through our work. Oasis at Guadalupe, we have an urban agriculture site that's 20,000 square feet. It sells organic, hyper-local food to the community. We sell at local farmers markets and actually right outside of our office at a good price. We've sold some food to local markets. We're serving primarily people of color. This site was actually created by a group of local residents, many of whom have either moved away or retired, or a couple have passed away. But residents really advocated for this vacant land to become an urban agriculture site. Interestingly enough, the city, when it first okayed the idea, said, well, we're fine with you guys having sheep and chickens and goats there. And one of the residents said, I actually don't want that. I'd like to just have a quiet place to grow food. So this site is now morphed into a really amazing resource for the community. We have men of color who are reentry citizens coming back from prison who have worked with us over the last 5 years. And they are learning how to interact with the public. They're learning how to grow. They're learning how to sell. So they do a lot of the work. We also have a number of volunteers. I don't remember the number. I'm actually about to take over the site in November, the oversight of the site. So I'm kind of getting up to speed right now. But this opportunity to sell food improves the interaction skills and engagement skills of the reentry citizens with the residents. Also, a 20,000 square foot site that's not covered in asphalt or concrete or housing reduces the urban heat island effect, and all of those plants actually help offset carbon. The site also produced about 1,700 pounds of food last year, and I think the goal is to double that, essentially get to 3,000 pounds of food this year and make the site self-sustaining. We have some money we've been able to get from Mass Department of Agricultural Resources. They have a very commercial focus, so we've shifted in that direction. We're also applied, I think, for the first time for money from the CPA program that Guadalupe mentioned, Community Preservation Act, which seems to be a great resource. So we're hoping, knock on wood, that we get a grant for that work this year. This is just a quick picture of the site. So we grew everything in grow bags because the soil had some lead. So we put a barrier between the surface and any grow bags, and we put down wood chips in the grow bags on top of that. And we're growing in clean soil within the grow bags. So this is probably 3 years ago, we now have planting beds that were built by volunteers. We now have a hoop house. We now have water on site. We're slowly kind of building the site to where it needs to be to really be efficient. But you can see from this picture, we were able to produce a lot of great food even in the first couple of years at the site. And these actually are, so we're going to talk more about tree planting in a minute. But we partnered with the Nature Conservancy on a tree planting project. And these are the two young men of color who were court involved, who were working with me on tree planting, but we planted some fruit trees at the Oasis site probably 2 years ago. And the funder, who very rarely comes out of New York, was actually there that day. And we sent her a peach, and apparently she loved them. So it started producing pizza. The tree started producing pizzas in the first 60 days. It was pretty remarkable. And they were really good. I've been over there for a while. I got to get back over there. So kind of looking at the EcoInnovation District, which is where a lot of my work has been. The EcoInnovation District is about a 13 block area, about 1,500 residents. About 66% of the people live at or below the poverty line. And so a lot of my work has been focused on this notion of neighborhood scale sustainability and equity. How do you improve a neighborhood like the Talbot Norfolk Triangle Eco-Innovation District, which has a community group similar to the one that Guadalupe mentioned, WOW. It's actually right next door to WOW. That community group basically makes the decisions about what happens in this area. So we've partnered with them on improving this neighborhood in different ways. And this just gives you a sense of where you're at. The white patch is the TNT Eco-Innovation District. This is Franklin Park to the left, and then Boston Harbor to the upper right. So we're really trying to transform a neighborhood that looks like this. This is what we affectionately call the auto mall. There's a number of auto-related businesses that operate on this one street. You'll notice there are no sidewalks. You'll notice there's a bus in the distance, but frequently it's hard for the bus to get down the street because there are cars parked on both sides of the street because of the auto body businesses. They do serve a valuable purpose in the neighborhood, which is why you can get your car worked on there for cheap compared to some other places. So they do provide a service that's needed. So there's not been a huge outcry to get rid of it, but I think that day will come, and eventually we'll go from something like what you see here to something like this. And these are ideas, conceptual ideas that the neighborhood's already said yes to. Climate and heat. This is a map from the city of Boston's Climate Ready Boston Map Explorer, where it says Dorchester Center is pretty much where our office is located, right on I'd say the T in Dorchester Center, and the Eco-Innovation District is just on the edge of that. So you can see we're in one of the hotter spots in the city, and that's really made us think about climate, again, the intersection of climate, equity, and health. And so we partnered with the Nature Conservancy, and you can see the Eco-Innovation District within our larger service area. We started looking at how we could plant trees. So a couple of years ago, we planted something like 200 trees and shrubs, both on our properties, but also gave residents the opportunity to pick whatever tree they wanted and to plant those trees on their properties. So the little triangles you see within our Eco-Innovation District, those are all private properties that took trees. I think there were about 25. And a lot of residents were from the South, so some of them said, I grew up in Georgia and I had peach trees around me, so I really wanted peach trees. Some people wanted apple trees, some people wanted figs, and some people just wanted ornamental trees. So we were able to do one round of that, and actually TPL did help partner with us on kind of an early aspect of that work. So that picture I showed you with the funder, that was both TPL folks and TNC folks who were present at that event. This is just kind of a close-up, so you can see the Fairmont line kind of forms a boundary of the Eco-Innovation District. It's this kind of triangle. The red stars were our offices, so you can see we're very close to the Eco-Innovation District. But this really shows you kind of some of the existing tree cover that's there. The dark areas are existing tree cover, but you can see there's a lot of places that do not have tree cover, and that's been an ongoing issue. We started to look at the impact of the trees we planted from a climate standpoint. So, many trees or most trees don't have a big impact until they get 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years out. So we looked at impact in terms of stormwater retention, air quality, looked at CO2 uptake from a dollar standpoint and from just an amount standpoint. And we looked at energy savings information, winter and summer. If trees are planted on the north side of your house, they actually help prevent cold winds from reaching your house. They kind of perform a blocking effect. And then if they're shading your house, you get some energy savings by cooling your house. So we just looked at each of the different trees and started to quantify that. So the folks at TNC did a lot of that work for us and worked with us on that. This is just, again, a map of the EcoInnovation District. So you can see the Fairmont line here, Norfolk Street, and then Talbot Ave that forms the triangle. But you can see the darker blue areas are where there's a fair amount of particulate matter or more particulate matter than the lighter blue areas. And that happens to coincide, surprise, with the areas where there's just not a lot of tree cover. So again, the need for more trees to get planted is a critical one. And we're still looking at ways we can get some funding to do more of that and continue that work. That partnership with TNC, this is just this is a little out of sequence, but this is just a kind of contextual map that shows you where the EcoInnovation District is. So Talbot Ave and Norfolk Street and Washington are kind of the three major streets that bound the EcoInnovation District. Here's a little more data about the EcoInnovation District. I mentioned 46 acres, 252 homes, 13 blocks, and about 30% of the folks live just under the poverty line, and another 33% live just at the poverty line. The key data point I want to call here is that the unemployment rate for young men of color is about 50% in this area, and there's only about a 22% graduation rate in our service area. So that really pointed us towards what can we do to help those men of color? Are there programs out there, or do we need to create a program that really leads us or points us to getting people employment who don't necessarily have a college degree or have quarry issues because they've had some criminal record. So that led us to doing some workforce development work, which I'll talk about shortly. And hopefully it's the next slide. It's not. This is a little bit out of order. I just kind of was tweaking it right before I came online. More data about the entire 02124 area code, which is where a lot of our service happens. This is a look at the EcoInnovation District from both a development project perspective. We have a couple of projects that are going on now, but also from the perspective of neighborhood slow streets. So this neighborhood was chosen as the first neighborhood slow streets neighborhood in Boston, which means we're slowing down the traffic to 20 miles an hour from the citywide speed limit of 25. You're putting up signage that tells you that. You're also creating opportunities for green infrastructure, which I'll circle back to that later. And you're also doing things like putting in chicanes to narrow down intersections and force traffic to slow down. You're also putting in speed humps. So this is a place where, like I said, we're looking at neighborhood scale sustainability. So we've been focusing on New England Heritage Homes and Norfolk Terrace and another project that's there as our affordable homeownership and affordable rental properties that we're building in the EcoInnovation District. The city has just recently, literally probably 2 months ago, completed the reconstruction of New England Avenue to include all of the different traffic calming and green infrastructure measures that I've just mentioned. I haven't even had a chance to upload the pictures yet into the slideshow, but and you can see the Talbot Ave station is right, literally maybe a 4-minute walk from this area. So you can literally get out of bed, walk across the street, hop on the train, and go downtown if that's still happening. But you wouldn't need a car to live in this area. And this is just a kind of close-up detail of some of the work that's happened with the slow streets area. These are some of the current traffic routes. And New England Avenue is really the major route. A lot of people take New England Avenue and cut up Southern Avenue and then cut through to Norfolk Street along Ferndale. So there was a lot of speeding going on. Southern Avenue is a straight quarter-mile shot. So if you're a teenager with a car at your disposal, you're going to see it as a raceway, which a lot of times it was. And so the traffic calming measures have really helped take care of some of those issues. And they've even put kind of a weird teardrop-shaped rotary at the intersection of, I think it's Southern and Whitfield Street. That was a really bad intersection. So, but again, it creates opportunities for you to put green infrastructure into the mix. And so we'll talk more about that in a second. But this is what a typical slow zone looks like in terms of signage. You can shrink this. This has also happened in the EcoInnovation District, where you put bump outs and thereby you shrink the crosswalks, making it safer for pedestrians. Flex posts are now employed, and rain gardens have now been put in a couple of places, again, as part of the traffic measures. I really should change this slide to say the future is here, because some of the issues that we're dealing with, particularly around climate change, are strongly impacting people of color. I just got this stat from somewhere, and I couldn't remember where. It was either in the Times or an email I got. I just saw it, and I just grabbed it and forgot to figure out who to attribute it to. So sorry about that. So I mentioned workforce development. So this was us doing some tree planting with folks from the Nature Conservancy. In the EcoInnovation District, we had some young people who the first year helped plant trees in their neighbors' yards. This particular peach tree, again, started producing peaches so fast that the owner had to stake it up because there were so many peaches. It started to bend over. So it's been a nice problem to have. So what we started doing was looking at green infrastructure, workforce development, because we know there's going to be climate issues. We know that there's no extant workforce that really deals with this in any major way. We know that the city is looking at green infrastructure, and in fact, they're in the process of creating a conservation corps. And it's still to be determined what that'll look like. But we've been looking for funding to kind of start getting people certified in green infrastructure and to get them jobs. So I am now certified, and my colleague Danilo is now certified to teach the National Green Infrastructure Certification Program, NGICP. It's ANSI certified. It's the only one of its type in the country. There's another one from a group out of Maryland. That's kind of a 101 level. I would call this the 200 level if you think of high school or college classes. And so the NGICP program that we've been implementing, we've now graduated 19 people from the program. 8 of them, not everyone has taken the exam, but out of I think the 10 people that have taken the exam, 8 of them have actually passed it. I've got another group of about 5 that wants to take it pretty soon, so that'll happen. And then we've been talking to the city about having someone maintain some of their existing schoolyards, for example. Guadalupe mentioned schoolyards, and some of those schoolyards actually have green infrastructure in them that's not currently maintained except by volunteers. So how do you begin to create this workforce that's certified and qualified to do this work? We've also been able to employ a couple of people at a green roof company, but I think there's going to be more work coming. And so we want to have people who are job ready to do this work. We're looking at creating a worker-owned cooperative, working with the city on that. Again, to have people who are job ready just to be able to get work. And I'd really like to have people starting to work, by next spring for sure. This is just another close-up of the work that we did along New England Avenue. You can see there's places where there are like slight bump outs or what are called chicanes, like right here where the road just bends a little bit. Those perception-wise make you slow down because you feel like the road isn't wide enough, even though it is. The bend in it makes you slow down. And so green infrastructure, they removed sidewalk on this side of the street, right adjacent to the Fairmont line. So this is now all what's called a bioswale, which allows stormwater to go back into the ground, removes concrete or asphalt that would be creating urban heat island effect. And they've also created a rain garden here and a rain garden on this side as well. Planted trees. I think there were 7 trees they planted. And there's a little mini rain garden right here that's pretty interesting too. So they were able to use this area as a demonstration project since we were all aligned in terms of policy and what the effect we wanted to have happen was. Residents got to weigh in on it. And I got a great comment from somebody who had moved out of the neighborhood and moved back. And he said, "Oh my God, I remember when we were talking about this, and now it's to see it in real life, it's amazing. He was really happy that we'd actually been able to follow through and do it. So Green New Deal has a lot of climate justice and climate equity policies. They're listed here. Green workforce development is obviously the one that we've been focusing a lot of our efforts on. We've also been working through a Kresge grant. We got a 1-year Kresge planning grant, and that led to a 3-year Kresge action grant, where we're really trying to, again, address the issues of climate-related health and equity. And so we're trying to meet people where they're at and get them what they need. I think Guadalupe mentioned this too, but we've been focusing on 3 key areas. The climate roadmap bill, which just passed a few months ago, the passage of HERO legislation, which like CPA doubles the deeds excise tax and takes that money and puts it to open space and to affordable housing. And then the city's doing a climate conservation pool. And so they're still in the planning phases of that. I expect that will actually become reality in the spring of next year, but they've got the money set aside. They got some federal money and some city dollars. And so we've been focusing on how do you engage residents around these issues? What does climate mean to them? And then meet them where they are, try to get them some of the funding, as Guadalupe said, that they need to move forward on the things that they would like to do. So, for example, we were able to get folks trained up on how to write an advocacy letter and call your rep and senator or your city councilor when you're talking about the Conservation Corps. So we had folks advocating for the passage of the roadmap bill. It did pass. The HERO legislation is still pending. I don't know when or if that will pass, but we're trying to ramp people up to do that. But we're also trying to listen and say, what is it about climate that you care about? So one person, for example, is very invested in, I'm blanking on the name of the school. It's the only VOC-Tech school in the city of Boston, Madison Park. And so Madison Park should be, in theory, be the place where our young people get trained to learn about the new green buildings or solar or, putting in the new type of HVAC systems or mini splits or insulation. But it's really not doing that well. And so we're trying to figure out how we can help, where the leverage points are, and how we can help her do what she wants to do. Another person would like to, he's got his own landscaping company. He would like to figure out how to get people of color who are urban farmers kind of a central location in the city to kind of share their food and to sell it, but also have it be a gathering place for community. So how do we help him do that? Another person is a Black contractor who'd like to get his folks that he works with trained up on these new green technologies and get them the skills they need so they can reply or respond to an RFP for work and really have a good shot at getting it, as opposed to maybe being a subcontractor on somebody else's bid. There's a whole network of connections here. This is this great map that was done by an MIT student, Win Constantini. The map's so big I can only show it to you in sections, but this kind of tells you some of the interrelationships that we have going on. So green buildings and green jobs. Corey Conson's the contractor I just mentioned. His company's called Mobius, but we've also got connections to people at the city. Kat Eschel is a program manager there. She's been leading the city's recent work through a Green Jobs Community Advisory Board. And then in terms of air quality and health, we've been partnering with both Earthwatch and Harvard School of Public Health on putting in air quality monitors. So we've got about 7 of those Purple Air fixed monitors. We also just got a small grant from Harvard to get about 5 mobile monitors. And start tracking data and see what's coming up in high sensitivity areas like, Codman Square where our office is. It's a 5-way intersection with a lot of traffic and pedestrians. Or at Talbot Bernard Senior Homes, which is located right next to the Fairmont line. It's one of our buildings. So again, we've got this huge universe of partners and potential connections there. It's just how do you get the work done? All this is very labor intensive, time intensive. How do you get the work done and how do you pay for that? And then mental health is another issue that's come up with some folks. So this is just, again, a piece of that larger mind map that I can't show you all because it's just too big. vacant land, food security. Also, that this has all been mapped too. So you'll see our urban agriculture site, which is Lupe, I think mentioned, or Guadalupe mentioned. It's one of the green sites along the Fairmont Greenway, and so there are a number of green nodes along the Greenway, and our urban ag site is just one of those green nodes. And it takes a village to do all this work. So these are just some of the partners we've had over the last 8 years to get this work done. And I will stop there and answer any questions.
That was great. Go ahead, Danielle.
I guess this is a question for both of our speakers, but I loved hearing, David, you talk about kind of meeting the community where they are and kind of seeing climate change through their eyes, what's important to them. I'm curious about kind of how do you, like, do they come to you? Do they know about you? Or do you kind of go out in the community, kind of asking folks what they would like, what they're looking for? Like, kind of how does that meeting of the minds actually happen?
I don't know if Guadalupe, you want to answer first. I'm happy to go. Okay.
Go ahead.
So for us, we just started convening. We actually literally started the week COVID hit. So we had a meeting of about 30 people. I think it was on March 3rd or something, and COVID kind of blanketed everything on March 10th. So that was the end of in-person meetings for a while. But we had about 30 people. We've continued those meetings, but then we had another group that was focused specifically on people of color. So we reached out to the people of color within the group, and other people have kind of shown up and been interested in this work. So now what we've been doing is really focusing on the needs of the people of color group and having them kind of lead us where they want to go. And the other group, while welcome to add new ideas, can also, of their own, is there to really support the people of color group. So it's kind of morphed over time, but it's been an effective way to really kind of keep people engaged and hear what they want. I hope that answers your question. Judy.
Hi, David. I'm curious about that street calming project. It seems great. I'm involved in one on the South Shore. I'm just wondering, are you tracking kind of different metrics, and what are they, and how will you know what the results are?
Good question. One of the things I want to do is take some of those mobile air quality monitors I mentioned, and then I probably will just keep one, and I'm a bicyclist, so I might just like ride through on a regular basis, but compare that neighborhood from a urban heat and particulate matter and all of that standpoint, and see how it compares to a place that doesn't have all of these amenities, right? Part of what we're trying to do is just collect data to see what shows up, because there's going to be some blip on the radar screen that we didn't expect. There are things I do expect, like, okay, the buses just went by, the particulate matter kind of number just went off the scale, and it went back down as soon as the bus went away. I've done that kind of air quality study in Dorchester before, but there are going to be other things that we don't know. So it's kind of looking at what you know, looking at what you don't know that you don't know, and then seeing what else comes up with.
I just wonder if more people will actually leave their homes and, walk around if it feels so much more inviting and safe.
I hope so. There's already a group of women that walk in the neighborhood trying to both walk for health but also reclaim the streets. So I should probably go back and talk to them again and say, hey, is this something you want to include on your route, or you're already including it on your route? How do you feel? Does it affect you in a positive way, negative way?
Yeah.
We've also had a couple of conversations with the city about, they had a program called Routes to School a while ago. And so we're trying to see if there are routes to school that have more trees, if those are also healthier or produce feelings that are positive in, children and their caregivers. So.
Yeah, great.
I don't know if it's a question, more of a comment, but I really appreciated the concept of engaging the community, not just in the work that needs to be done in hiring local, but also developing the workforce to be able to hire. And I'm curious about, I appreciate what you're saying about Madison Park, and it's not quite living up to the dream right now. And so what does it take to support that programming, to encourage, to, we're basically let people know, hey, this is a career path for you, and this is an option, and if you need it right here in your own neighborhood, like what connections aren't being made yet that need to be made, or what work needs to be done to develop that?
Yeah, we'll probably start. One of the things I realized probably a couple of weeks ago was we need to really start mapping out, like taking that map I showed you, taking another look at it, but really start mapping out, pulling pieces out of that map to create a new map essentially that shows the different job tracks that you can have. So we're talking to folks at Madison Park. I have a meeting today with someone from Benjamin Franklin Institute of Technology.
Yeah.
Roxbury Community College is right across the street, so they've got a center for something technology. Don't quote me because I don't know the name of it, but they're looking at some of this new green technology as well. And so, Wentworth Institute's not far away. So how do we begin, Northeastern? How do we begin to kind of figure out what the pathways are for someone even before high school, right? If I teach this 101 level class that I mentioned, green infrastructure class that I mentioned, it's for ages 14 and up. So I could start somebody that young, and if they were going to Madison Park or anywhere, they could go to the next level class or go to a program at any of the institutions I just mentioned. So how do you begin to create those tracks and see what they are? I don't know what they are. I'm still learning them, excuse me. I'm still learning what they are. So my goal is to kind of find out more and then see what they are. But again, that's all very labor and time intensive, but it is, that's what you have to do to find out. So does that answer your question? Sorry.
It does. Yeah, no, I know it's not an easy answer. That's why I say I'm not sure if it's a question or just here's a topic of conversation. Like, this is a piece of it that we don't always think of. And I love that connection because I do some of that work separately in our funding. And it's nice to, realize like part of it is not just providing the resources, but creating the resources we need to make this vision happen.
Yeah, like I'm still trying to figure out who are the possible employers that are out there, right? Besides the two green roof companies that I know, besides the city, are there others? And I think there are. There are contractors getting hired to build green infrastructure projects, not just here, but in other places. So how do we, in some ways, I'm making the road by walking, by doing things like talking to the city and saying, can we have a policy that says if you are a contractor responding to a city RFP, you get more points in the city's ranking system if you have someone on your team who is NGICP certified. That gives me a pathway to get some of my folks jobs of those contractors. We're to create our own thing. We're looking at creating a worker-owned cooperative too, but that's a bigger level. But we're looking at it. We're partnering with the city on that too.
Well, I think this is great. Do you have any, Guadalupe or David, do you have any parting words of advice for us? I think you can see what we're trying to do here, which is to stimulate interest in this sort of giving. And, we can go any number of directions. We've chosen to focus on people, really. But any special words of wisdom?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, no, thanks for having us. It was great, being able to chat with you all and answer your questions. And I really liked hearing David's presentation. So I'm glad I was here to witness that. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, without sounding self-serving, funding organizations like ours to do the work is critical. I think we're kind of at a key intersection. So we're both kind of listening to what's happening in the ground, understanding kind of the larger context, try to make the connections for people. So I think that's critical, but also, helping, like the groups I mentioned, beginning to help them kind of realize their vision of something on the ground. If it makes sense, it's got to be practical. It's got to be achievable without it costing, an arm and a leg, and maybe having partners to help fund it. But I think kind of looking at that too, because then you're kind of dealing with the issue from a couple of different sides. And then again, pushing cities or municipalities or whatever to create more opportunities for, let's say, workforce development or climate-related workforce is critical. And I know different foundations do that in different ways.
Well, I think we're at an inflection point with the city, so it'll be interesting to see how that works. But and I'm pretty optimistic that something good is going to come out of all of this. But anyway,
I have to go vote right now.
Right.
Go.
I think we should say farewell to our speakers, and then maybe if we could just do a quick wrap up with remaining group, that's okay. But thank you from the bottom of our hearts. That was great.
Yeah, thank you, and feel free to reach out. Phil knows how to get a hold of me.
Yeah.
And great to meet both of you.
Thank you.
Great to meet you all too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Good luck.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
So here we are. Apologies for being so undisciplined. Usually you get 20 minutes, that's it. But it's stretched on. Any thoughts about this session?
I would just say that I think what David was just talking about, is probably the most important thing from this session is these are really practical solutions that the two speakers talked about, a little bit more grounded than the prior sessions in just really block to block changes. And as I was thinking about it, I thought, that's how you engage. Like we're always saying, how do you engage people? It's like, well, go out to their street corner and talk to them about how to improve their street, and they'll have something to say. So anyway, it felt really practical and also dealing with every issue at a number of different levels, kind of surrounding it. Was the second thing that I heard.
Yeah. In that vein, I remember the last session, somebody talking about Mayor Bloomberg's plant 1 million trees, and then people in the neighborhoods actually snipping off the top of these trees and destroying them. In this case, you go to a house and you say, what kind of tree do you want? And somebody says, oh, I really like a peach tree. And then, that's buy-in at a very local level. But it seemed great. You want to quickly talk about funder strategy and then sign off? Now, I'm doing this, I guess, maybe primarily for Kate, because you're kind of new to this, and I think you're bringing a lot to the table is my guess. You usually do. But I think...
I appreciate that, Bill. Thank you.
Ultimately, we are going to make these showy sort of grants at the end of this to sort of demonstrate our commitment and interest. And I think this is where we're going. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I think people will have all kinds of chance to weigh in on this and contradict. But basically, we're going to really focus on people rather than sort of buckets of activity. So, it just has to be kind of resident-led, we think. We're going to have a preference for organizations at some kind of inflection point, maybe a certain fondness for startups, but not necessarily. And I think, that's about it. We have here about a list of 10 organizations. I'm happy to rattle these off, but I wonder which I can recite right now if you are interested, but I wonder if you have certain groups that you think would really benefit from the kind of attention that would come from this funding initiative.
Are you asking me specifically, or are you asking the group? I wasn't sure. The group?
I'm sort of asking you specifically because I think we've got a grants budget and
We do.
Experience.
So one thing about this particular session for me is that we have traditionally been looking at, more what I would call typical environmental organizations. And so to be taking the angle of actually, let's talk to the organizations that are representing communities, and that this issue has elevated, and that's an angle that really connects you to the people who are directly affected. So I really appreciate that this session exists, because I'd already started thinking about that, but I hadn't quite executed on it yet. So although we have been working with Green Roots in Chelsea, which may be on your list already, I'm not sure. Okay. And interestingly, an early grant that we did early in this sort of phase of our life was with Mystic River Watershed Association,
right?
Which at the time was really working as like what I would call traditional grassroots conservation, right? Like clean up the river, count the herring, like that kind of activities. And they've really catapulted, I think, to be sort of a hub, like a relationship builder. And so their focus is on trying to create access to the river for these marginalized communities that are all up and down the river throughout the whole watershed. But working with communities that have little social capital to make stuff happen, and they're helping to build those relationships and get the grants. And so, so that's another one to sort of put on the list, I think.
I'm glad you're saying that, because I sort of waffle on Mystic River, but I will tell you it's a darling of one of our funders, which is the Shaft Charitable Trust.
Sure.
And I think they funded them through an early Social Innovation Forum grant. I don't
yes,
know
that's probably right.
who was the funder, but so that's interesting. That's just a short little river, 600,000 people.
Right. Yeah.
Live really close to it. It's amazing.
So when Lupe was talking about the Neponset River and that waterfront, I mean, that resonated for me too with Mystic. I mean, it's the same story essentially. Like it exists and you can't get there and you can't use it. And then there's the Charles and all these communities that have wonderful access, and like, how can we replicate this and keep it up and maintain it?
Yeah.
So that's the other piece of it is who's going to be maintained.
Kelton, do you have any thoughts in this area? Now you're in this membership group, so you're not making grants every day, but I bet you've got some active thinking going on.
Yeah, I mean, this has definitely been a learning opportunity for me, because it's not an area that I spend a lot of time thinking about. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I worked when I was my work focused on nonprofit partners at Philanthropy Mass. We worked to Speak for the Trees a lot, and helping them with their grant writing. And they seem like a fabulous organization just from working with them on grants research and what they were looking to do.
I'm glad you mentioned them. They're my little darling, which I've never been able to fund. I've had them turned down. But do you want me to read very quickly? I'm just
Phil, I was going to suggest, because we've kind of run out of time, I was going to suggest that you give them to me, and I'll send an email with your list, the two that have been added to the list, and invite others to kind of add to this list, and we'll share it in advance of the next meeting.
That sounds like a great plan, and we sort of have run out of time.
Yeah.
I'll just say we have one funder that's a little quirky that has a great interest in native populations.
Right.
There's a native land conservancy that is on our list as a result of that.
Yeah. So,
okay. Good
Thank you all. We'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.